Hello everybody, I'm Junia. This is Uncommon Sense. Thank you so very much for joining us. My guest today is Dr. Joseph Affholter. He describes himself as, and I quote, a multidisciplinary inventor, an entrepreneur, and a scientific adventurer, unquote. He has worked at Dow Chemical Research on potential cancer and autoimmune therapies, small company management, Gantech Organic Agriculture, Maxigen Biopharmaceuticals. He has 14 patents, consults on next generation agriculture, life science, and energy resource development, and is a board member of Water for Life Institute. He received a PhD in molecular pharmacology at Stanford University and a BS degree in chemistry from Michigan Tech. Dr. Affholter is the Dow Entrepreneur in Residence at Saginaw Valley State University, and we're lucky to have them, and welcome to you. So, I love the word scientific, a phrase, scientific adventure, but what does it mean to you?
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the question. Really, it's great to be here. I think it's a term I use because it captures the idea that we're made to explore. And whether we be trained scientists or not, the purpose of the exploration is really adventure, is enjoying life, discovering new things. In my case, developing new technologies, helping others to do that, and basically using a core set of tools, which really is the scientific method, to just explore new areas. So I call myself an adventurer because I've been involved in a lot of different areas of science. That's one high-end reason. The other one is maybe I'm not sure what else I am, so I just use the term adventurer.
And what is the scientific method?
The scientific method, something we I think once learned routinely in school, maybe is not so routine anymore, is the concept of you make an observation and it draws your curiosity. I think that's sort of where it begins. And you develop a model of what is the cause and effect relationship to the things you're seeing, and what's the input, what's the output. You develop a model and you say, I think maybe this is what's going on. And then you imagine ways of testing that model. The scientific method really is a method for discovering what's true or more true than what you knew before. And so it's a process of exploration, discovery, and idea development.
Is that something you learned at home or at school?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'll have to ask my mother how far back her memory goes. But I think it's a combination of both. I think, like most children, I was pretty curious as a child. And I think I had good parents who reinforced that. And it developed into curiosity that could be used in a lot of ways. And I think that led me into science. So I studied chemistry and the life sciences both as a student as well. But I think I was thinking about science and doing things with science and technology before I ever studied it.
You had the idea that you could actually do something with science? No, I say that just from my own experience because it just seems so unrelated to life. So I'm thrilled that you had a different experience.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess my view of life really is almost like one walking through a forest, and there are some stones and some logs and some things along the way. And underneath each one of them is an interesting story. And there are things to be discovered there, things that we can learn from that, and so it's a metaphor, but things that are hidden for us to find, kind of idea. So approaching life where somewhat we're looking for answers, but we may not necessarily know that at first. Really, we're just drawn to things and we're curious about them. And the connection between what we're observing and discovering and real problems in the world, that comes through more and more experience and education and exposure to real life problems. So that's how when I think about science, I think about that process of discovery and processes, principles that can then be applied.
Yes.
The problems to which they're directed are usually useful, otherwise we wouldn't call them problems. And that's where benefit comes from. That's where businesses come from. I don't dissect, personally, I don't divide between, science and technology and business. So my life experience is such that essentially discovery is that process of initial finding of something. Technology is the process of applying that knowledge to something useful. And business is the place where it multiplies and becomes available to people. And that's how, somehow along the way, that's how I've developed my own thinking about science and technology, and that's how it becomes useful.
It does become useful. And I think one of the great period of time we're in is people think, at least in the IT area, that you can go out and invent a design and do it. And so it's a better time in that sense because it's more pervasive in the society. You can get up and go. But you started as a research scientist, and then you stepped away into small company management. Why at that particular time?
Very good question. I think I'm making up an answer by looking back. By looking
Explore
backward.
it with me.
Yeah.
Discover it.
The reality is I find that also was a process of almost evolution of life, sort of thinking, evolution of thinking, where for me, I had invented some technologies that I could see as being useful in a variety of different industries. This is life science. It has to do with, well, in fact, the ideas came from the world of breeding animals, and began to think about how you could apply the same ideas to making better molecules. And I began to think about how that could be used in a lot of different industries. And that's what led me into business. It still was a scientific compulsion, really, but to build that sort of conduit from the idea to the utility in the marketplace, I said, well, you need a business to do that. And so it wasn't a decision to go into business, it was a decision to take the next step. And so I think business is a natural, for me anyway, it was a very natural evolution of the career and the discovery and development process. And
how were you able to teach yourself what you needed to know to do business with this idea?
I think the answer is, as everyone would say, through making mistakes. I think most of success is about relationships. It's not about how effectively we manage the ideas or the discoveries, as much as that is a passion of mine. I think it's about people, and it's about how well we learn to work with and frankly enjoy the people we're working with, and then enjoy what we're working on together, and enjoy what we're developing with others in other businesses, and then the enterprise develops. Almost a more of a, at least at the early stages, more like a family, than a bureaucratic organization. So for me, I grew into those different levels of roles through, I think, recognizing the importance of the people that I was working with. And so that obviously comes from, a value system, and it comes from stuff I don't really know how I developed that, but the credit is not mine. I think it's, I think it was taught to me by other people.
Well, people have different personalities and strengths, but the idea of the family and good relationships also includes that they're very strong in what they need to contribute.
Right. Yeah. And mutual value.
And mutual values.
Yeah.
Life values?
Yeah, both values as well as value, imparting, valuing one another. And, in a family, you really can't get away with not valuing one another.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we don't.
Yeah.
And so I think those human dynamics work. I think there's a lot of synergy between relationship development principles and technology development principles and business development. I think for technology-based businesses, both are required for for something meaningful, successful.
Do you think there are different motivations, whether you're or the people who do science have different motivations than the people who do tech or business development? Do they need to be motivated differently?
You mean from a management standpoint?
Yes.
I would have. That's a good question. Not thought about it that way before. I think at the root level, people want to do good. They want to do well, and they want to do good. What they want what they're working on to matter.
Yes.
And I think sometimes in the human services side of life, and I'm an entrepreneur, that's an entrepreneurial domain, whether we're in a nonprofit model or a for-profit model. Servicing and helping people is a tremendously valuable area of professional engagement. Likewise, science and technology are. I think we often sometimes think of the technical person, the engineer, the scientist, as being interested in things, not so much in people. We often think about, or processes, we often think about the human services person as being interested in people,
right,
not things, not processes. The truth is, neither of those are true. In my experience, most people who are doing science and technology and discovery have a passion for delivering something of tremendous value to the world. It's for the sake of people that they're doing, or the environment, or the greater good of the world. And so they're driven largely by concern for people. Likewise, human service provider type people value the benefits and the utility that science and technology provide them in their delivery of service to others. So I actually don't think those two worlds are nearly as far apart as we sometimes, I think, in our everyday life.
I agree with you, but I have been, when I start thinking about it, I have been puzzled over the years that why the general populace divides into people who feel for them and the people who do not, because it is, as you say, that if you're a science, you are looking at the data. You are doing the scientific method, but your core value is to find out, is it true, or what is true, or what the hypothesis is true, where can I go with this? But it doesn't translate into care exactly, because I myself have had that experience. I'll say something, they'll say, well, that's an anecdote, Is it replicable? Well, I don't know, So there's a communication, I think, difference between from the people who are in the lab in terms of values and the people who are more, I feel for you, could do this, do that. And being an emotional person, I kind of understand that both are really good. But now some of these things, do they translate to family life in the sense that you try to make joy?
Interesting, yeah. I think, to me, the concept of finding things that bring you joy, things to do, things you enjoy, things you love, is critical to having a satisfying life. And I think when I use the term adventurer, for example, that's really what I'm getting at, is this idea that it's okay to be driven by curiosity, to take ideas from one area and apply them somewhere else. And so even in raising kids, we have 4 children, and raising our children, we've tried to do that. I think, history and time and our children will have to determine whether we've achieved that. But yeah, I think my wife and I place a great value on ourselves and releasing our children into figuring out who they are and what brings them joy, what they really love. And I think as a teacher, as an instructor, I try to do that as well.
Do you have any advice for in parenting to help children figure out who they are?
The answer is yes, and it depends on the age. I mean, I think for young children, it's just, in some ways, watch them.
Yeah.
Watch them, and they'll often point to their inclinations, and it will change regularly. As kids get older, especially into teenage years, there are some tools actually that we we've used, and even into the university. Most university students entering the university do not end up majoring in the major they declare when they walk through the doors. So, we continue through life developing that. Well, one set of tools that I use regularly with students, and I've used with teenagers as well, is a tool called StrengthsFinder.
Oh, I don't know about that. What is that?
Very nice tool developed by the Gallup organization, and I have no association with Gallup. It's just a very good tool. It's a book. You buy the book, you get a code, you go online, you take an assessment, and it gives you some real useful words that apply to you. It gives you almost like a fingerprint of sort of what do you love, and it's not about what you know. It's about what kind of, do you like this kind of activity or that, and it helps people get a feeling for what really makes me tick. What do I love? So we use that in the entrepreneurship program at SVSU as well, almost as a foundational tool to help students think about what do I love? What direction do I want to go in? What's going to bring me joy? That was the question you asked.
Yes.
Because I think it's a huge part of life. Living and having joy is highly desirable. It's something we should see.
I will say one anecdote. Years ago, I went through one of the auto plants in Flint, and I said to one of the guys on the line, I asked him, how did he like a job? And he went, it's a job. And I was so saddened by that response. And what made me so sad was, he may have had to have the job because of the dollar amount or whatever, but there's a way of turning that in to something that gives you a sense of satisfaction.
Absolutely.
And he couldn't, or he chose not to do that. And so I think he cheated himself, and probably on his work too, somewhat, but at least he cheated himself from having a self-respect that he did a really good job, and he found out the ways and made whatever. But anyway, I'm thrilled that there's this other technique. Now tell me what you're doing at SVSC.
Thank you for asking that. As the entrepreneur in residence, Herbert H. and Grace A. Dow Foundation endowed entrepreneur in residence over there. It's one of my roles is to figure out where we go in terms of entrepreneurship and work with faculty members to do that. This is a team of people there that I get to be a part of, and it's a real pleasure to work with that group. In taking on the role, one of the questions was, what in this region, what do we want to do? What do we want to bring about in the life of a student walking through this? It's a minor, by the way. It's an entrepreneurship minor that we do. And in talking to one another, experts in the field, and reading the literature, we really came to a pretty strong conclusion that what we want to do is have a program that revolves around creativity and innovation, which is very, very different than most entrepreneurship programs. We bring students into an introductory module where they're really learning the mindset of an entrepreneur. How does an entrepreneur think? When an entrepreneur makes a choice, how is it and what is it that they're doing? And sort of it's almost at a foundational level decision making. What motivates entrepreneurs? So we're getting at the mindset of entrepreneurs rather than necessarily the how do you put together a business plan. We get to that later for those who want to do that. And we go from that introduction to the concepts of entrepreneurship to the process of creativity and innovation. That becomes the hub of the whole program. And most people have wrestled with the question in this space, have wrestled with, can you teach creativity?
Yeah.
Can you teach innovation? Can you teach leadership? In all cases, the literature has told us yes, and we're acting upon that. So we have this second step, which is a course called Creativity and Innovation, where we help people learn how to become more creative. And then the final step of that, because it's an entrepreneurship program, is developing models of how do you turn an idea, which may be a technology idea, it may be a human service idea, it may be a social entrepreneurship nonprofit idea. How do you turn that into revenue? And of course the models are different depending on what type of product you're working with. So helping students develop comfort and processes for answering the question, whose pain, whose problem am I solving?
Yeah.
Is where it's all headed. So that's really the focus of the program are those three modules: the mindset, creativity, and then modeling, business modeling. And then for those who want to develop
Just repeat that again. The three things you have to keep in mind.
First of all, it starts with the mindset. What is the right mindset, or what is the common mindset for entrepreneurs, if one can be defined? We attempt to do that. We attempt to use, in many ways, stories of entrepreneurs to do that. I think of stories as carrying greater content at times than we can really reduce to principle. We take the principles out that we can extract, but there is something about somebody telling their story that reaches beyond what we can easily define. Story is important, and we help students begin to look at their own life and career as a story that they get to write. That's a good entree then into creativity. Creativity, just a real quick principle, I don't know, and your listeners may appreciate this. Creativity, basically the teaching or the developing of it requires something very phenomenal, but very simple. Developing of lists of possible ideas, and suspending judgment of those ideas. Something critical thinking people have a difficult time doing.
Yes.
Separate the judgment for later. There will come a time where you evaluate the ideas. But in order to be creative, you need to reach way beyond the incremental nuances of daily life to and that doesn't happen until you develop some pretty long lists. So we develop some tools for how do you get from where you are to broader, bigger, further reaching ideas. You cannot do that without suspending your, oh, that's a stupid idea kind of reaction.
But the lists are really the ideas of how to solve the problem, or there's specific questions to broaden your thinking?
They may simply be areas in which to look or read and, and to look for ideas to solve the problem. They may be specific ideas. They may be complete, a lot of them may end up being completely useless. But in order to get the useful ones, we need to tolerate the useless ones. That's really the principle.
What is an entrepreneurial mind, a mindset? How do you get to that? How do you think like that?
I think there are lots of components to that, but I think the real foundation of the entrepreneurial mindset really has two components to it. One is it's value centered. It's probably values centered as well, but it's value centered. It is this.
Your values. Society's values.
I'm actually thinking about
the
value in terms of
value.
Product,
Yes.
service.
Yes.
So, and probably includes all of those, but
yes.
Product or service value, a real sense of what can I do to add value to somebody else's life, to create value for somebody else. And so it's largely others focused. It's often very team oriented. The concept of the sole entrepreneur going out and creating massive enterprises, the stories we read about on all the best-selling books. Although the stories are probably accurate, oftentimes we emphasize the sort of that individual who is important. But most entrepreneurs will tell you, look, what I do because of the great team that I have around me.
Yeah,
so
that's the fun too.
Ability to build team, ability to identify opportunities to deliver value, create value for somebody else. And then some creativity about how you create a process, a tool, a method, a manufacturing process, or a team that can deliver that value. So I would say value creation is the first side of it. The second side of it really is creativity and a real recognition of the gifts and skills in people around you, this team building skill. Both of those are pretty common among successful entrepreneurs. There are many other components to the entrepreneurial mindset, but generally speaking, they have those two things working for them almost all the time.
How do you keep enthusiasm up?
Among myself?
The group. Well, of yourself.
Yeah, I think every business, every individual is different. They lean into different gifts and strengths for their motivation. But oftentimes it's the significance of what they're working on.
Yes.
It's significance. Meaning. It gives them a great deal of meaning. They're delivering something that makes a difference to people. That makes a difference to them, because most people want to do that. They want to create value.
You know, you're very, I'm thrilled we're having this discussion. And now I have to end it.
Okay.
Because I have to summarize, but I really like to continue quite a bit.
Sure.
So, this has been a very interesting discussion. For one thing, he has a life philosophy of discovery and joy equals satisfaction. That if you can find something of value to others, whether you're on the bench as a research scientist or in business, that gives personal meaning, and it gives really success because it drives you to find the scientific answer. And that brings me to another thing. He applies the scientific method to his life. What is it? What do you want to know? What are the pros and cons of doing this, that, and the other to check it out, see what you've got. But the end result is to find, is it right or is it wrong? Is it a step on the way towards the answer? And he takes that sense of, it's not really mystery, but happy discovery in all parts of his life. His children, I haven't got to the wife, his employees, his students, people on the bench, me. All of it is about joy. All of it is about, it's not getting better, but it's living life in coordinates with your true value system and your strength. And Gallup has a very good test you should take to see what, in fact, those things are, so that you can know yourself a little bit better and therefore be a little bit more consistent to what makes a good life for you. So over and over and over, I say the same thing to you. Do something nice for someone you know and someone you don't know. That's part of discovery and joy for me, and I hope for you. And thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time. And thank you so much to our darling guest.
Thank you. It's a privilege.
To contact Junia, send her an email at info@juniadone.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadone.com. Thanks for joining us. See you next time for Uncommon Sense with Junia Doan.